Peter Cairn begins the tragic, painful transformation into something monstrous after the necroplasmic explosion from the previous issue altered the nanites in his body. We're going to talk about the outcome in Rat City number 2 from Image Comics. See you in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Rat City number 2. This issue is written by Erica Schultz with art by Z. Carlos, colors by J. David Ramos, letters by Erica Schultz, and the cover art for cover A is drawn by Bjorn Behrens. Before we dig in, let's recap what happened in issue number 1. Readers are introduced to Peter Cairn, who is a highly decorated and incredibly well-trained Black Ops, Special Ops soldier. He was wounded in the course of battle and he lost both his legs. Cut forward a little bit later and he's received special prosthetic legs from the PTS Corporation with no strings attached, supposedly, but we now know that the corporation is looking for guinea pigs for an assortment of experiments. Peter didn't match up to what they were looking for, and he's released back to become basically a retired soldier and blue-collar worker, but he gets to keep his legs. While he's on the job, he's caught in a necroplasmic explosion that was first witnessed and sourced from Spawn issue number 301, and that somehow affected his body that he didn't know how or why. When he goes back to his apartment before the issue ends, he sees a green, glowy vision of somebody who looks like Spawn. That brings us to Rat City number 2. Peter is trying to make sense of the vision, and the necroplasmic energy is now coursing through his body, and he passes out. A former military friend by the name of Reese shows up, knocking on his door, saying, "Hey, buddy, I've been trying to call you. Alarm's going off. You've been passed out or whatever has happened to you. Come on, you got to come with me." And Peter's like, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Well, since that whatever happened, the explosion, and nobody quite makes sense of it, PTS has put out a call to anybody who's ever had prosthetics to come in for a free upgrade to check you out to make sure that everything's working okay." Sounds pretty good. Sounds like a free ride. Nobody wants to turn down free stuff. So off they go. A little bit later, we catch up with Peter and Reese sitting in the PTS waiting room. They're just talking light, easy breezy, but there's another guy who's also in the room, also waiting for free upgrades. But this other guy, this third man whose name we never hear, is acting jittery and sort of stressed out. And he keeps mumbling something about seeing a vision of a demon. And the more he talks, the more Peter recognizes that the description of the demon that this man sees or has seen matches the description that Peter saw before he passed out in his apartment. While they're waiting, Reese gets the call to go in first. He's brought into the waiting room where we meet Dr. Bose, who is the sort of morally gray surgeon that we saw from the first issue. Dr. Bose says, "We're just here to check you out. We'll give you your free upgrades," and he gives him a shot. Reese says, "Well, wait a minute, what are you doing with the needle? This is just for an upgrade. Just take it off and we'll give you the new one." And he says, "Well, this is a sedative to calm you down." Reese, of course, passes out cold, and Dr. Bose says to his lab assistants, take everything apart, give me blood samples, start tearing them apart. I want to know what's going on, why the people were affected by that explosion. The lab assistants begin tearing Reese's body apart. He's still intact for the most part, but all the cybernetics are taken off. They're taking blood samples, they're examining everything, and he says, "Give me nanites from off his prosthetics, the pieces of him that have been affected by the explosion." When they start taking pieces off, suddenly something activates within Reese. His face starts glowing with outlines and shapes that look sort of like a Spawn mask. And then he's jerked awake, but in a raged, kind of hulked out state. His body is growing bigger. His muscles are huge. And he's roaring and raging. And then he starts charging to the attack. We don't know exactly what's happening or why. And Dr. Bose says, "Call in security. We've got to calm him down." Outside in the waiting room, Peter hears all this ruckus going on. He starts banging on the door because his friend's trapped in there and he doesn't know what's happening. He says, "You got to let me in. You got to let me in. You got to let me in. What's happening to my friend?" As he gets angrier and more enraged by what's happening, bits of his body start transforming a little bit to take on familiar shapes that look like things like Spawn's hands with clawed fingers and just dark patches all over his body. Suddenly, Reese breaks through the door. And by breaking down the door, he knocks his friend over, and Reese looks down and he recognizes his friend and realizes what's happened. And just as he's about to reach down and help his friend up, he gets shot right through the middle by the security forces from Dr. Bose. And recognizing that his friend is dead and doesn't understand what's happening, Peter explodes, and then he transforms into a full-blown cyberpunk cybernetic version of Spawn. Let's switch gears to talk about the technical aspects, starting with the character development. Longtime readers will recognize what's happening to Peter. He's transforming into a Hellspawn, although from a different point of view. Erica Schultz is taking a twist on the old theme, and she's turning it into a tragic tale. It reads a lot like, say, a werewolf story, where this innocent man or good man is bitten, and now he's cursed, and now he's transforming into a monster against his will. So there's a heavy tragedy element to this, or at least tragic elements that kind of put all the pressure on Peter to fight against something that's happened to his own body that he doesn't understand. So from that aspect, the portrayal of Peter as effectively a good guy who's now turning into something monstrous comes across really well, and all the range of emotions that you would see from him, like confusion and fear and anger, are projected extremely well. Moving over to the art by Z. Carlos, is not a stranger to Spawn titles, so Z. Carlos has drawn for other titles in the past. The art looks pretty good to great here. I mean, the character work, the figure work is strong. You get a few splash page type wow moments. All the energy and the pop and the vibrancy is all right there. And J. David Ramos's color choice, the palette range of colors chosen, and the way they're applied and smoothed and textured in looks really solid. Let's move over to pacing and structure. Technically speaking, this is in terms of plot and things that happen, this is a very short issue. Effectively, it all breaks down to two major scenes with a few bits in between. There's Peter and Reese kind of getting together, Peter being woken up by Reese and moving over to PTS to get their free upgrades, and then you have Reese moving into the examination room for his upgrades, but everything just going haywire right after that. So really sort of like a part A and a part B. So structurally it's small, but it feels like a lot's happening because Erica Schultz builds in momentum, and there's a sort of a growing tension as you see things start to go wrong, and that those feelings of things going wrong pile up and pile up and pile up until you get to the big finale wow moment, which is Peter turning into a spawn or hellspawn of some sort. So the pacing is good because it never really slows down. The structure, although simple, has a lot of meat to it, and you really feel like the entire issue is one big buildup to a very a rich and very strong payoff at the end. Thematically, if it wasn't clear from the description before, this is a tragedy. You have this man who just wants to get on with his life, even though he's had a life of military service where he may have, killed a lot of people and shed a lot of blood. He's now moved into that retired phase of his life. He just wants things to be clean and simple. And all of a sudden he's just whammied with this thing out of his control. And this whammy, which you could equate to a curse, now is transforming him from the man he wants to be into a monster that potentially he can't control. Now, we don't know for sure yet how much of the hellspawn he becomes is under his control. Is it a separate personality? What are the powers? And is he being driven from some external force? We don't know that yet. But from a theme perspective, this is a true blue, run-of-the-mill, but still really well done tragedy. If we take a macro level look at the bigger picture, where does Rat City fit into the greater Spawnverse? The answer is, for right now, we don't know, because the explosion that created Peter came from the necroplasmic explosion from Spawn 301. But since then, we've gone through the entire gamut of the Heaven-Hell War, and in the end result of that war is now a dead zone covers Earth, so anyone who draws power from heaven or hell is effectively powerless. What we don't know is, does that mean that the dead zone that encompassed Earth does not apply in Peter's dimension? Are the heaven and hell of the main Earth where Spawn exists, is that the same heaven and hell that exists where Peter's version of Earth exists? Where do the two, obviously they connect because that's where the explosion came from, but we don't know how much more it connects, and whether or not does that present a loophole where Spawn, the Scorched, some of the other characters, can they come into Peter's dimension and all of a sudden get their powers back? Does it work that way or not? I'm not quite sure. But for right now, it sort of exists very separately, except for the inciting incident that gave Peter his powers in the first place. Final thoughts. What do we think about Rat City #2 from Image Comics? Erica Schultz leans heavily into the classic trope of a tragedy about a man cursed to become a monster. But the issue, even though it's got a very simple plot structure, builds momentum very well. It stacks and stacks and stacks with a very strong payoff at the end. And Z. Carlos's art is excellent. So if you're in the mood for a kind of an Elseworlds style alternate reality version of Spawn, this is shaping up to be a really solid recommended pick. Therefore, we're going to give Rat City number 2 an 8.5 out of 10. I want to know your thoughts. Are you reading Rat City, or are you fully invested in the Spawnverse and all the assortment of titles, or is it just too much and you just want to stick to the main Spawn issue, or are you somewhere in between? You'll pick it up maybe later in trade. Want to know your thoughts? Leave a comment down below. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned through the outro for the next review.